You're listening to a Pubhouse Network podcast for developers by developers.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest Stack D podcast. I am the interim host, Daniel Hinojosa, and we are going to be recording today, episode number 60. I'm Daniel Hinojosa, and like I said, I'm the interim host. I'm from Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I'm a developer instructor. I just like discovering new things and talking about new things, and those are the kind of things that I like to do. Kito is going to be here in about, we think in about 30 minutes, so he will make a surprise entrance at some point during this particular podcast. But we have some of our other usual suspects here today, so we'll start off here with Josh. Josh, how are you doing?
Hey, doing well. Thank you. Name's Josh Juneau. I'm a Java developer and Jakarta EE developer by day, author and open source developer by night. Also do some speaking here and there, and probably more so coming up here in the near future now that we have some more in-person conferences going. So yeah, I'm looking forward to the podcast.
All right, excellent. And keeping healthy, Josh, I think from my memory, you have not been stricken with this plague that has been roaming throughout the land. Is that still the current status?
I did have the plague. I did have it after the new year. My family did get it. And then just recently, it has crept back into the house. So hoping to steer clear of it, but
yeah.
you know how it is.
Yeah, so I know this seems like Velcro. Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, best health for everyone here. And next, let's go with our other favorite cohort here, Ian Hlavats. Ian,
hey,
estás?
Daniel. Hey, guys. I'm doing well. Thanks for asking. It's great to be back. It's been a while. Hope everyone's having a great summer. I'm Ian Hlavats, full stack developer, Java developer, front-end developer, Angular and Java are my two kind of main technologies these days, and former, well, author, not former author. I'm an author, wrote a couple books on JSF. And
yeah, I think once you write a book, you're set.
You're still an author. I'd like to write another one someday. I'm waiting for the right inspiration, though. It has to be something really that I can really get behind. And that was a lot. I was really into JSF when I wrote those books, and I'm really excited we have someone who was also part of the JSF community in the early days on the call today with Max. So I'd like to introduce Max Katz, everybody. If you're familiar with Max, he's well known in the Java community and definitely was a big name in the JSF community when I was getting involved. So look forward to talking with you today, Max, and I'll let you actually introduce yourself, since I think your career has changed a lot since we first met. So why don't you introduce yourself, Max, and tell us a little bit about what you've been up to?
Yeah, of course. Hi, everyone, and thanks for inviting me. So yeah, my name is Max Katz. I'm currently with Octa, and I lead community for a product called Okta Workflows. It's a no-code platform for automating identity processes. I guess I'll just go backwards. Before that, I was with IBM and leading developer relations for the North America team. Before that, I was with a company called Apri. Apri was in the low-code space. It was a mobile app builder. You could build an app for iOS or Android, connect to backend services. And then before that, yes, so I was involved with JSF and projects such as RichFaces and AJAX for JSF. And yeah, I published 2 books on JSF RichFaces.
Nice.
So yeah,
let's talk about that for a sec. That's a great starting point for our session today, because that's how we met, actually, Max. I remember meeting you at a conference once, and it was a JSF conference, and I knew at the time I'd read about what you were working on, like with the Exadel tooling, and I was really interested in the JSF development tools at the time, and working on the JSF toolbox for Dreamweaver was my kind of introduction or contribution to the JSF community, or at least my attempt to build something that would give developers a more visual workflow while they're building applications. And I think that was one of the most interesting things about JSF was that it's a component-based framework that lets developers build applications, not a low-code or no-code technology by any means, but trying to reduce the amount of code you'd have to write by providing the rich faces. And we still have prime faces, Apache, my faces library. There were many, there's still, I think, ice faces out there. And lots of companies were building really interesting component libraries and were shipping them to the customers, to developers, and developers were building applications with these things. And that was, in a way, almost like a low code approach, because you're reusing other people's code, right? Like, you don't have to write all that complex code to render a date picker or a data grid or table or some other buttons or widgets, right? And on top of that, these components had intelligence. They could do AJAX, they could do some more interesting kind of rendering and enabled, disabled states. And it wasn't just like a simple kind of set of components. They actually were fairly rich and complex components, right? So how did you get involved with JSF actually in the beginning? Was it through your own personal interests, or your company was working on it, or what was your backstory?
Oh, that's an interesting. Yeah, I need to go back many years now. But so I was back then. I was working at Exadel, and so and again, I don't remember how it started, but we got involved with Strats. Do you all remember Strats?
Oh yes.
Yes. And so at that point, this is again a long time ago, but we built, I know Exadel had a Strat studio. I think it was I don't remember if it was just like a standalone application development IDE, or maybe it was already a set of Eclipse plugins. But that's how we started. I remember with Strats, working with Strats, and I think that's the time kind of when JSF appeared.
Yes.
And I think one big difference is, as you said, JSF was it was a component-based architecture, and as far as I remember, Strats wasn't.
Correct.
And so that's how we got involved with JSF. I think we just like this, that it's a component architecture, and then you could just drop a component and it would render simple as an input field, or as you said, like a calendar or a table, or anything more sophisticated. So we saw a potential in this component approach. Nice. And then we started working on, and I think one of the kind of ideas behind JSF in general, is also you mentioned, is the idea of components, that other people, you've got this framework, and then other companies can just build these components, and then you can just drop a component from someone into your application. And so we liked that idea, and we figured, hey, we take JSF, and we started working on RichFaces, which was kind of a rich AJAX component library on top of JSF. And at the same time, I think because of the component approach, we also started developing tooling for it, right? Because again, being a component, you just drop it. And it wasn't low code or anything. It was still code, but you could drop a component. So, right, I remember we had like a split view. We had a code view where you just drop a tag, and then you switch like a preview where that component will render how it would look in real time. But I think, again, just to answer your question, we started with Struts, and at that time, JSF, the spec was, released or made public, and when we saw a lot of potential in this component approach.
And I think it worked out really well for Exadel too, right? You were saying that graphical tool you guys built, the Eclipse plugins, and the AJAX for JSF, that had some success, didn't it?
Yes, absolutely. So first, both the tooling, the set of plugins, and the component library. So there's actually two component libraries. There was AJAX for JSF, and then RichFaces. AJAX for JSF was more kind of like a core, and then the RichFaces was those were more rich components that were actually acquired by JBoss or Red Hat today. And also remember, if you remember, so there was JSF version 1, and then there was a JSF version 2.
Yes.
So a lot of the ideas from AJAX for JSF were put into JSF 2, specifically around AJAX, how AJAX works, how you update specific regions on the page.
Yes.
So yeah,
I remember my first experience with AJAX, and just really how kind of exciting that was at the time to be able to have this asynchronous communication with the server without the full page refresh, right? Again, from the, thinking of the web as a user interface environment or platform is tricky, because it's traditionally been like the static HTML model, and then you add JavaScript on top of that, and then you add the XHR object, and you're able to send and receive requests, right, asynchronously. And then obviously, what's different about today, I find, looking back to those days, and obviously it was a lot of the XHR itself, XML HTTP request. Hey Kito, welcome to the show.
No, it doesn't look cool.
He's adjusting his sound. But what's interesting today is that the data format has changed a lot, right? XML obviously is a very verbose format to send data right? And JSON is a little bit more efficient. But at the time, I think that was really a breakthrough to be able to send XML back and forth. And yeah, JSF2, you mentioned, like, for me, one of the biggest improvements they introduced was standardizing facelets as the view engine, or the view language, view technology. Forget the terminology they use, but going from JSP to facelet, view declaration language. Thanks, Kito. Thank you. That changed everything, because now we're dealing with XML, basically XML or XHTML specifically, which from the IDE point of view, and I was working on tools at the time as well, that it made life a lot easier to parse the HTML when it was XML. You knew it had to be well formed before you even parse it. Otherwise, look, if the XML parser that's rendering the HTML bails, I don't have to support that HTML either. And like that code is, I knew, like, it just made life easier as a tool developer, knowing that the developer who's authoring the code has to conform to the, XML standard before you even parse the code. Otherwise, yeah, if the code is broken, it's broken. And dealing with broken code was a big part of writing tools. Like, unfortunately, helping developers fix their code was part of my motivations behind the developing those tools for the developers. But yeah, I remember using RichFaces and AJAX for JSF a lot, and we tried to support. I also built plugins for those particular libraries, and I really enjoyed it. And I actually worked with RichFaces for years after that on projects, and I'm grateful for that contribution you guys made to the world of JSF and template-based frameworks in general. And yeah, if we think about, obviously, JSF today, I mean, it's immature. We'd say it's a mature technology, right? But, technology ages, but architectures, I think those are a little more, they have more longevity, right? If you think about component-based architecture for UI, is still valid today. I mean, Angular is using that approach today. What's changed is, well, server-side templating became obsolete in a way, I think, but we still have it today. Kito will correct me. I know he jumps in on this one, but we have all server-side rendering.
Oh yeah, all the JavaScript kiddies are back into it now, so it just goes back and forth.
Yeah, and it makes sense. Node.js, obviously server-side JavaScript. So it's not it's not obsolete. Server-side templating still has its place, but generating, so building applications with components. Again, it's not a low code or no code approach, but so it was a step in that direction. So Max, tell us kind of, I don't want to jump around too much in your career, but how you got into low code and no code, because we've talked about that as well. Maybe Kito, if you want to weigh in a little bit before we jump into that discussion. I know you just joined. I did have some other questions before we get to that. And I don't want to take over too much of our airtime here, but I wanted to know, like, Max, what your thoughts were on the comparison between like JSF back then and today's web frameworks. Even if you're not an advocate necessarily, what are your thoughts on like comparing JSF and Angular, for example?
Yeah, I've been away from JSF for a good number of years. I mean, I think at the end, it's still, you still get at the end, it's just, HTML, JavaScript, and CSS, right? I mean, that hasn't changed. But I think with the browsers becoming a lot more sort of powerful and becoming kind of more of a platform, people saw that they could kind of move a lot of the UI logic, right, to the client or to the browser.
Yes.
And I mean, I would say that's probably one, in my opinion. I mean, I'm sure there are more differences, but just kind of one way to look at it.
Yeah.
Perhaps, I don't know, maybe even like a little bit of a simpler approach when you've got JavaScript running in the browser versus, server-side components, and then they're being, they're sent from the server to the browser for rendering. But I don't know. What do you think? Again, I've been away from JSF, and I never spent a lot of time with Angular. But
right. Well, you're asking what I think, and I'm glad you asked, because I did have some strong opinions towards kind of the end of my involvement with the JSF expert group and the JCP when I was trying to help shape like JSF 2.1 and the kind of next iterations of JSF. And I remember I was on a conference call once through like Ed Burns was at a conference presenting JSF next steps, and he brought me in as a guest through the conference system, and I was kind of sharing my thoughts through at this conference, and we were talking because I did a little SWOT analysis, SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats for JSF. What's next for where we are now with JSF in the industry and what was going on around us, and Angular was starting to take off. And today we have a lot of other frameworks like React and Vue, and it's not just Angular, obviously. But my suggestion was that we should try to target front-end frameworks. JSF itself has the architecture to be able to, like, we changed the Vue rendering engine. What if we somehow could generate Angular JS code or React code from JSF components, right? Instead of doing all the heavy lifting, generate the HTML and JavaScript and CSS, what if we target, like, take a more abstract approach, the component and the component tree in your UI, right? That's your UI architecture, and how you translate that to HTML. Maybe that part could be decoupled a bit, because those components still have like their logic and they have semantics, but do they have to do all that HTML generation as well? Like, I think it was just too much of an architectural change. It didn't really like it. Sure, we could have done it, but at the end of the day, JSF was already mature enough, and it is what it is. So it wasn't really in scope, right, for JSF to publish, Angular code or publish React code, or using JSF as a kind of abstract framework to target other frameworks. So I understood it was not really in the cards, but I saw that as one way JSF could have kind of reinvented itself, or stayed maybe JSF 3, like target not just HTML, but if you targeted like JFX, or you target Swing, or you target other UI technologies through an abstract UI architecture, right? But kind of like
one of the
JWT
original visions, right?
Yeah.
Was we could render not only to HTML but also WML. I remember doing presentations on rendering to the what was it called? What did W stand for? Was it? It's a mobile markup language.
Was it wireless?
WAP? No, wasn't it?
Was it WAP? Yeah, wireless markup language. That's what it was, I think. Maybe, yeah. Anyways, yeah, that was when phones were so bad that they couldn't render like a normal web page. So we had to send them different markup language. Now I remember doing, talking about how you could do that with JSF.
But
go ahead.
But let me ask you this. I mean, and this could be, I mean, maybe this is a whole different angle, but I mean, JSF was pretty mature, like again, like in 5, 6, and 7, right? But and I think it's still being used in big enterprises. But then, and this is just my view, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, but all these startups were built between like '05 and now. They wanted to build something quickly and fast.
Yes.
And so that a lot of them just went, look, let's just pick whatever JavaScript framework was popular that year, or even use PHP or something similar. It's like, look, we don't want to invest in JSF, right? We want to build something fast. So what do you think about that? I mean, could that be one of the factors that kind of JSF didn't take off, except maybe just some Java heavy enterprises?
That's a valid point. I think it's a very valid point, Max. Actually, like at the end of the day, is it really like, is it expedient to just pick this particular framework over that framework if your goal is to build an application, get to market first? And I remember there was a point in time before Spring was acquired by VMware, and I remember the serverside.com, right? If you guys ever used to go there and lurk around, and guys like Rod Johnson would show up and they would post comments, and I was observing that the community discussion, and Spring at the time was using like a PHP forum for its support, and there was some questions about that, like, hey, you guys are a Java framework, why aren't you using Java to build your support forum, right? And I think Rod himself answered, we're not in that business. And it made sense. Like, it's like, okay, it's not practical. Just put a PHP forum up and support the users and focus on your core business, which is a framework. And it was obviously hugely successful after that. But I think to your point, Max, it's true. I mean, and JSF was kind of heavyweight approach in some ways, because there's a steep learning curve. You have the 7-phase rendering cycle. You have to know all the ins and outs of each phase of the rendering cycle, and the state management, and there's some gotchas.
You know what? I've been thinking about that lately, and I'm certainly not I don't think I mean, I work on JSF projects. It's a pretty core part of our business, because Blocky Schultz works with me a lot. So we, but a lot of it's legacy stuff, but there's not a whole lot of people that can go into a legacy project and understand what the hell all that ancient code means. But we also do, we use more modern frameworks. And so like, on new projects, I almost always use TypeScript and web components, and I usually don't use JSF on brand new projects. What my point is that I've actually been working with React lately. I'm not building the React part. I think I mentioned this in like 3 or 4 podcasts, like, because this project's been going on forever. But we're taking an existing React app that another team is mostly building, and then we're making it work for mobile using Capacitor, which is basically the successor to Cordova. So it's, we're basically doing a lot of work making it work for iOS and Android, and so people can download in the App Store. But as a consequence, we still have to touch the React side a lot. And React is billed as being, just a UI framework. You can grab the other parts of your app you want, and it's somewhat opinionated. But I mean, I get these stack traces, these React stack traces, and I'm like, this is like a lot of crap going on before it gets to my code. And then there's like the React component tree, and there's all this other stuff in the component tree, like the React context they have. And JSF really never used the component tree for state that way, so it's it's just an interesting different take, because they'll have a context at one level of the component tree, and any references to an object can be mapped against the context that's higher up in that tree. But if it's not there, we'll go to the one higher up in the tree. So there's all sorts of different things going on. And we get these stack traces, and some of the other developers I have no idea what this means. And half the time I'm like, I have to look it up. And I'm like, this looks a lot like JSF to me. It looks like a huge, ugly stack trace. 10,000 things are happening before it hits my code. And I'm just thinking, this is not that it's better or worse. It's just that it's like the drama, the framework question, right? There's always, if you want to use a framework to make your life easier, there's a large level of abstraction, even in areas like React, where supposedly it only does the UI part, nothing else in your application, right? There's just a lot of stuff going on. And even, my preferred framework for web stuff is Lit, which is just a library on top of a web component. So a lot of it's more native, which I like. So there's less framework stuff, but still, Lit's still doing stuff. It's not like it's I don't like to use plain vanilla web components because there's too much boilerplate. So
Yeah.
so there's sort of that whole yin yang sort of.
Sure. Kito, I had a question to you then, because we had stated this before that everyone took a dump on JSF and just like berated it with the 7-layer burrito stuff or whatever.
Right.
Since you know a lot more frameworks and everyone here does know a lot of frameworks, I think we mentioned this over and over again, but do you still agree to the statement that a lot of these modern JavaScript web frameworks are kind of like doing the exact same thing that JSF does?
Especially Angular. Angular is pretty much like Jakarta EE in the browser, pretty much.
The difference is that the noticeable difference is the compile time is in milliseconds versus seconds, which is an order of magnitude, right?
I think that depends largely on the project, though. So you're working on projects that are well maintained, right?
Started from scratch all the way to, I don't know.
That's right. That's what you get, Ian, for making good code.
Yes, right. But
you're punished.
I've been working with this project, this React app. It takes like 10 minutes to build a thing, 10 to 15 minutes to build the entire thing. Now the live reload stuff is fast, right? But I can get live reload stuff with Java if I use Quarkus or something like that. They build stuff really quickly. So that's not, it's taken Java a long time to get to that point, but it's not a big deal for Java anymore. But the real build, and like I could be building 400 EJBs. It would take the same amount of time as all this stuff.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry.
So, I find this interesting. Just a kind of a general thought, like all these frameworks, right? I mean, if we go all the way back, let's say even the year 2000, I mean, there were, probably hundreds of different frameworks out there. And I think every framework tries to do the same thing, tries to make development easier and faster, right? I mean, if you go to any web page, any company, any product, we make development easier and faster and something along those lines. And so we're in 2022, and I mean, development is still hard. Right? It is still hard, even though we had so much progress in so many different frameworks or libraries and tools. But I think development is still pretty challenging.
It is challenging, and I kind of think I know where you're going with this, and I'm really interested to pursue that train of thought too. So, but one thing I'd like to add as well is that yes, it's challenging, but I think it's the same thing that happens. Like I asked one of my programming teachers once, like, what happens if we, like, at the time we had, I don't know, 2 gigs of RAM was a lot on a computer. We thought a desktop machine, that's a lot of RAM. Would we ever use up that much RAM? And he said, of course you will. If you even triple it, a developer's just going to figure out how to use more RAM, right? And that's the thing that we've done with technology, is that we've solved hard problems in 20 years ago. Today's hard problems are different than those problems, right? But we're still pushing the technology to the limit, constantly trying to solve harder and harder problems. Like if you think about AJAX, right? What was the problem we were solving? How to refresh the page without hitting the refresh button, right? Which was a major distraction for the user, right? You have to hit the refresh. Now the whole thing's re-rendering, and if you have a slow connection. But now today we don't even, like, AJAX we barely use it. We use it to make REST API calls, but we don't do partial updates anymore. We don't do like that partial rendering. I mean, at least I don't with Angular. I mean, you in a way you do, but you have like dynamic UI that's like as data comes in, parts of the UI update. So you have the similar design, but in a very different way. It's not, it's more, I think it's a more conscientious way of using the network resources. You fetch some data up front, you store it. And what do you do now? You have more data to hold on to in the browser. As you mentioned earlier, Max, right? The browsers become more sophisticated. And that's why we have more sophisticated tools today to deal with that, like frameworks like Redux, for example. I know Kito is not a huge fan of Redux, but I like it, and combine that with reactive programming, and you get RxJS and NGRX in the Angular world, which is reactive programming.
And actually, I was going to say, I liked NGRX. I didn't like RxJS because it felt it was like too cumbersome, the API. But the idea, I have nothing against it. And I thought NGRX, I think, is that the one? There was one which was like really integrated with Angular, and then there was another one that's the one that I liked a lot. That was well done.
It's hard to do Redux without doing reactive programming because everything is asynchronous. So you have to set up these observable pipelines and react to the code. I think the data is coming through from the API layer, and then it gets stored in one place. It has to update the UI in another place, and you need the publisher subscriber model for that kind of stuff. But so applications have become more complex, but yes, it's still hard. Development is still hard. Max, to your point, yes, it is hard. How can we make it easier? What other approaches are there, right? Drum roll.
That's
Yeah,
a great opening.
yeah.
We need some sound effects here, like to just punch in there.
Is that a question about no code?
It's definitely, yes, a low code, no code. So tell us about low code and no code, Max. We pretend we have no experience with it, which may be true actually in most of our cases, but maybe you guys have some experience, maybe you don't. I don't have much experience with low code, no code, but I know about 4GL. I remember if you guys ever heard about 4GL, fourth generation languages, the idea was like, you don't need a technical background. You're a business analyst, you can build an application, just click, click, done. Is it the same?
I think just to dovetail on that, Max, I'm setting you up here. So so Ian's got the broad question here, but if you could couch it in terms of us who are a little more jaded about all of the no low code attempts of the past, if you can give us sort of a sense of what you think is different about the approach now, because again, you know, the pendulum goes back and forth, but each time it's a little bit different.
Yeah, well, I think just in general, I mean, low code, no code, I mean, I think it's more of a marketing term, right? It's just, I don't think it really means anything. I mean, I personally prefer visual development, although it's not used as much. But just in general, visual development is not new. I mean, we can go back more than 20 years ago, and there was some visual development or like Visual Basic, and there's some other tools where, and again, what I just shared is like, hey, the goal was we make development easier and faster. You don't have to worry about the plumbing, you know, you can focus on your application logic. Again, it's almost funny, like any company you visit today, it's like, oh, we allow you to concentrate on the application logic. So no, I don't think visual development is new. I think it's here, or it's been here for a long time. You know, and again, we can fast forward a little bit to JSF, right? I mean, there were some elements of some kind of visual development, right? It wasn't like perhaps like a true development, but you could, you know, drop tags on a page, right? And then switch to preview and just kind of see how it looks. So, you know, that's kind of maybe perhaps some early elements of a kind of a visual development. But, you know, so I think it was a question like, how did I get into this low code, no code? So Apri, right? So this is a little bit like 2000 and I don't know, 9, 10, 11. So yeah, I think at that point, the browser became a lot more sort of powerful and became more of a platform. And then, yeah, you could start building, you know, you could create whole editors, you know, drag and drop, with drag and drop capabilities inside the browser. And that's what we did with Apri, right? So you had a little phone screen, and then you can just drag and drop components into it. Actually, the kind of also interesting story, we started with jQuery mobile. So the components that you would drag and drop, that's how we started with jQuery mobile. But yeah, but I think the goal was always like, hey, let's make development easier and faster. Let's hide some of the code as much as we can from people and just make it easier for them. So that's how I got into, again, I started with low code. Once I left Apri, I sort of was still very interested in that space. And that's how I ended up at Octa, using, you know, working with Okta Workflows. I'll give you, perhaps this is a kind of a personal story. It's like, why do I like this space? So again, I've been, you know, developer, programmer many years ago now. Now, can someone ask me to write code today? I probably could, but it will take me a very long time to get up to speed because, again, development, as we said, is still pretty challenging. So if someone gave me, hey, write this app, could I do it? Yes, but take me a long time. But that's what I like.
Yeah, I was
That's why
going to say,
like,
where's the W code? Where's the W key? I don't know. I don't remember
yeah.
where that is. That's right.
So that's why I like no code, because I have a good technical background, right? I mean, I understand what's a JSON, what's an API call, and things around it. But if you give me a no-code tool, I can actually build pretty quickly, and that's what I like about that. So yeah, and that's why I like the space. Now, if we fast forward to today, from 10 years ago, I mean, the browsers are even so much more powerful. I mean, right? It's basically just a platform where we live all the time now, and I think the browsers became so powerful enough where we can build even more powerful visual tools. I mean, if you're familiar with Airtable, right? It's a database or a spreadsheet. I mean, it's entirely running in the browser. I mean, people do these really amazing things. Or like Webflow, if you're familiar, right? It's a web development platform entirely in the browser. And there are many other tools like that. So I don't know, it probably happens every number of years, but I feel like we made a really big jump from the previous generation no-code tools to what we have today. And perhaps in a few years, we'll make even a bigger jump.
Right. That's interesting, Max. And if we look at some of the ideas and motivations too, right, behind low code, I think there was a Gartner quote that by 2024, low code application development will be responsible for more than 65% of development activity. And this idea of citizen developers, right? Like the democratization of programming, like everybody can write code. And I don't, some hesitation about that idea, because I think software development is already very democratic. If you look at cultures like Spotify, the squad framework that these guys use, they have very much Scrum Agile model that it democratizes already decision making, right? Like it's not a top-down kind of management system. It's more of a consensus-based approach. And I think, professional software development is hard for a reason, and there's skills that you need that go beyond just writing code, and obviously the soft skills as well, architecture and communication skills and organization. Yep. And it's not great if you can introduce citizen developers and anybody can build an app. The question is, how many of those apps will become the next Spotify, or will become the next big big successful software application? That's to me is it a different, is low code really targeting a different audience? Like who is the audience for low code really?
Yeah, I think yeah, I don't think you won't use no code to write the next Spotify or Airbnb or your banking app. I mean, those applications are going to be built with code. So yeah, I think the better audience target, for, I would say, internal apps. That's much better fit for these no code platforms. But you mentioned I think you mentioned citizen developers. So if you go to any no code conference, or if you ever saw like a Gartner or a Forrester paper on no code, I mean, the one thing they usually always say is like, so there's such a big demand for developers, but number of developers is pretty fixed. Again, if you look at different numbers, it's about 25 million. And that number hasn't really changed, I think, in a number of years now. But the demand for applications is just so high, and all these developers at 25 million, they don't have enough time to build these applications. And again, let's say as a business person, you go to your IT and you ask them, hey, can you build this application for me? And then they say maybe, and then in 6 months later or 12 months later, they build something for you, and then it's not what you wanted. And so this is where they say democratizing, app development is like, you don't no longer need to wait for your IT people or the development team to build this application for you, right? If you want to build an internal marketing tool or internal sales tool or like an automation, you can grab one of these tools and just and build it yourself. So this is the key value. So again, if you are Bank of America or Delta Airlines, or you're not going to build the Delta Airlines application using no code, right? That's not going to happen. But a lot of these internal applications, a lot of automations, sales, marketing automations, internal websites for whatever, I think those are a really good fit for these low-code, no-code tools.
Nice.
So I just want to dovetail on that. So one of my clients a few years ago was a company called Red Pill. I think they're out of business now, but they were in the Lotus Notes space. And to me, Lotus Notes was sort of the quintessential no-code, low-code tool. It was initially, I think, initially low/no-code. Then they added stuff and some weird Eclipse stuff and some weird JSF stuff they put in there too. What our job was, we were sort of this company was sort of in the Lotus modernization space. But whereas most companies in that space, their job was like to migrate all the Lotus Notes apps out of your app, into some other platform. Their job was basically to say, okay, well, you have stuff living in Notes, and why don't you just put a much better user interface on it and have it like really powerful web-based user interface on top of it. And just for those who don't know about Lotus Notes, it was quintessentially like a tool which companies could use to build random applications internally, and end users could build the applications. You didn't have to be able to write a lot of code to do it. And a lot of what the apps people built were like these small databases, something with a data table to pull data from somewhere, but also, things for making reservations, little forms you have to fill out and then do some business logic and email it somewhere, lots of little applications. And what I learned is that these companies that had Notes had hundreds of these applications. And what was interesting is that there were hundreds of them. And of course, there were no standards across them. They're all horrible. But they worked. I'm sure they did the job, and there was one that we rewrote as a standard web application, with web components on the front end and a REST back end and all that kind of stuff. It took us like a while and cost a lot of money. And I was like, this is, for what they were doing, it wasn't really worth the money, right? Because it really was sort of a database, babysitting a database sort of thing that the low code, no code thing for Notes actually was pretty good fit for. It just was really old and outdated and ugly. So what I'm wondering, like when I think about that scenario, it's like, okay, they got to a point where Notes essentially went end of life. Like many of IBM's, several of IBM's larger projects, they sold it to a company called HCL. So HCL maintains Notes. They also maintain WebSphere Portal and some other huge IBM products. And I think HCL was planning to do some fancy stuff with it. I have no idea what happened. I lost track of what HCL did with it. But, these companies had all these apps, hundreds of apps, internally. And and on the one hand, like if it was, all written in Java or C++ or, some low level language, it'd be really easy to sort of see a migration path. But when you're tied to proprietary platform that's essentially dead, your options are more limited. So whenever I think of no code, I think sort of that model. It's like, okay, what happens when at the end of the day that company is out of business and I built all my stuff on their platform, and now everything's a software as a service. So like, whereas back in the day, you had Notes running inside of your organization. So as long as you're willing to run Notes, your stuff would run. As long as you're willing to maintain whatever servers. Now it's like, well, if Joe Schmo company goes out of business or sells to somebody else and they discontinue your product and you've got hundreds of little apps running. So I'm just wondering, I'm sure there's a counter argument. What is the counter argument for companies that are big on no code or where their main product is like a no code product?
Yeah, the Notes example, it's a very old system. So yeah, but if we talk about the newer platforms, that could happen, right? The company can go out of business and then, your stuff might stop working. It's just the nature. So it's not always you can get the source code or you can just take whatever was running and just deploy it somewhere else. So yeah, you have to be a little bit careful. So, there are bigger companies that have no code tooling and there are smaller companies. So you just have to kind of, do some due diligence and figure out like, hey, does this make sense to use and what happens if they go out of business?
Well, are there companies that have mitigated that by saying, okay, we have the ability to generate version of your app in whatever language or platform that you can take with you, or like what are the mitigation strategies that companies offer?
Yes, I think like Webflow, right? So it's an editor for building web applications. So I think there you can export the code and just sort of run it somewhere else.
Okay.
And I think they generate pretty clean code. So you could, if you needed, you could just load it into another IDE and perhaps make changes.
Gotcha.
Make changes there. But yeah, there's some other platforms, especially the automation platforms. So yeah, I mean, if the company goes out of business, it's going to be pretty challenging for you. Yeah. I just want to also mention, just going back to this whole no code, I think another reason there's, I guess you see more of it today. I mean, there's so many companies that have APIs today, right? Exposed REST APIs. And I think today, you no longer just use one company, or your data no longer sits in just one place, right? You've got Salesforce, you got Workday, you got the Jira, and you probably could have 10 or 20 other, right? And so how do people they want to integrate? They want to have some events happen when something happens in one system, they want to do something in another system. And I think the fact that there are these APIs, you see all these no-code platforms where we can sort of connect these APIs together. And when they say when something happens in one system, right, you do something in another system. So I think that's another reason these platforms, especially the automation platforms, they allow you to kind of connect various APIs. So the API economy sort of gave this kind of I don't know what you call it, but a reason for these no-code platforms to be built, where you can kind of connect or put together these various APIs. And again, with just an example with Okta Workflows, again, so when a user joins a company, so you can have a Google Workspace account created for them, and you can have a Slack account created for them, and you can have a Jira account created for them, and something else. And of course, behind the scenes, these are all API calls, right? So anyhow, I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, let's jump into that. So you worked in low code, no code for a while with one employer, and then you moved on to Okta. So Okta is a great tool. Let's talk about Okta for a bit.
Wait, wasn't there IBM in between? Just
there
is
is, yeah.
something. Okay.
Yes.
All right. I just want to make sure
IBM.
I wasn't confused about something. All right. Sorry.
we can segue. Do you want to talk about your experience at IBM a little bit?
I'm not trying to derail you. I just wanted to.
We talked about Notes, right? We talked about Notes, right?
That's true.
That was IBM.
So there's
There
IBM. Okay. All right. Sorry. Go ahead. Yeah.
Hat tip to IBM. Okay. No, Okta. Let's talk about Okta. So what's changed today? Okay, I have some experience with Okta. So just to share a little bit my perspective as a user, developer working with Okta, how helpful it's been, right? And how much, what kind of problems it solves. And in particular, what interested me was the Auth0 acquisition. And we talked about that briefly before the call. So Auth0 is another company that produces libraries for web apps, mobile, front end, like single page applications, traditional web apps, and they give you libraries to do authentication, authorization, if I'm not mistaken, right, Max? And one of the things that we use with them is JWT. So JWT for me, JSON Web Tokens, was one of the kind of really interesting technologies that's come out of the last few years that at least into my experience, I don't know how old JWT is, but I think I only started working with it a few years ago, but I find like what you can do with that already with your authorization bearer tokens and the way you can, we used to rely on JSession ID, right? The session cookie in our browser, and you knew there was some session sitting on the server with your servlet container somewhere. But nowadays you don't need that state anymore. Server side has become more stateless, right? And you have your APIs that are pulling data from somewhere, sending it back to the client. But how do you authorize and authenticate and authorize the client, right? How do you make sure the right, only the access that you want is being allowed? And JWT is one way you can do that. If I understand it correctly, right? You have your bearer token and your HTTP headers. And so it was really interesting that Okta acquired Auth0 because it makes sense, right? Okta already has all these great tools for identity management, integrating apps from all the different vendors, like you mentioned, Max. And now they have this great set of libraries for developers to further enhance the login experience, the authentication and authorization process. And I think that's what I found, really interesting with using Angular and these technologies, is that the things you can do now, like JWT payload encryption, for example, is another approach where you have this kind of symmetric encryption between the client and the server. So your data in flight is actually being encrypted, even though you're probably already serving up your UI over HTTPS. But to further encrypt the data, you can now use payload encryption. So all your post calls, your post, and all the HTTP calls to your API have another layer of encryption as well. And just curious to know, Max, so from a developer point of view, since your background is as a developer, what is the real selling point for Okta and its related technologies? What I know you mentioned from the business point of view, you're trying to onboard users, you're trying to offboard users, create accounts for them, but from a developer point of view, what's the real benefit?
Yeah, I'm more on the I'm not as familiar with all the offerings that Okta has for developers, because I'm primarily focusing on Okta Workflows. Not primarily, that's actually what I do all the time.
Nice.
But I think, as you said, with Okta and with Auth0 is to really, for developers, is to simplify identity and everything around identity. So you can build applications, you can drop, again, a library, a widget or something, and you got a login screen. And of course, there's a lot of things that need to happen when you click submit a login.
Yes.
So Okta and Auth0 take care of that. So it's really sort of, identity for developers, I guess, if you want to call it.
Yeah.
And it's amazing all the technologies that Okta supports. We worked with like OIDC or OpenID Connect, with OAuth 2 as well, which is a whole other authentication layer from like machine to machine authentication. It's really quite a amazing company in that sense.
They
And
support SAML as well, which is a little older.
Yeah, SAML, and definitely it's like pretty amazing if you think about all the different technologies that are available. So Max, talk about the workflows for a bit. What are some of the kind of things you can do with Okta Workflows? Like, what problems can it solve?
Yeah, so Okta Workflows is a no-code automation platform for identity processes. So I'll probably just give an example, and I think I might have shared this already. But when a person joins the company, right, you need to do many things, from giving them access to email, Slack, Workday, and probably again 50, maybe even 100 different apps. You need to add them to different groups. You need to email their managers, and so all these steps can be automated. Again, before you would need to write scripts or use whatever other tools to do that, and of course you have to maintain them and so on. So now you can automate. So it's a no-code visual platform where you say, hey, when this event occurs in the system, so in this case, when the user gets activated, for example, you complete all these steps, right? And again, this is just a very simple example. You can do, there are many other things you can do. Now, number two is that also, so this is what's called a joiner, mover, leaver. So joiner is when someone joins the company, mover is someone who moves within the company. So you change their managers. Again, you change their different groups they're assigned to. That's when person moves within the company. And then leaver, right? And then person leaves the company. So a lot of things happen when person leaves the company. You need to move their files to their manager, perhaps. You need to email a bunch of maybe different people, say, hey, this person is leaving. You need to cancel their subscriptions, right? Because you're paying for everything from Workspace to Slack and everything else. So in general, you don't want to pay for the accounts which you no longer use, so you want to cancel those. So that's the leaver scenario. But again, there are many more examples. So I mentioned the licenses. So for example, you can build an automation that runs maybe every week or every month, and it checks like who are the people who haven't logged into the system for the past 30 or 60 days, right? And then you can say, oh, if they haven't signed into this application for 30 days, perhaps they're not using it. So I could deactivate their license, as an example. So you can build these kind of automation. So there's again a lot of what you have to do by write scripts or use some other ways. Now you can automate based on when some event occurs in the system, or you can do schedule. Now you're not limited to just your sort of Okta environment, like when the user joins or user is being deactivated. There are also other platforms. So you can, for example, we call them connectors, but these are connectors to other systems like Google Sheets, Slack, email, Workday, Jira. So you can listen to events that happen in those systems and also do something, trigger a flow when something happens.
Oh, so you could fire someone through Jira. I mean, through Slack. You could say,
correct. Yes.
Oh, you're fired, and then all of a sudden, they're totally wiped out.
Wow,
that's pretty cool.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. So the history of workflow. So there was a company called Azuka, which Okta acquired about 2.5 years ago, and it was a general purpose automation platform. And again, I think what they shared with all these APIs, I mean, without all these APIs available, all these automation platforms wouldn't provide a lot of value because you would just be limited to what you have inside your organization. But now you can connect to all the systems. And then, so they acquired Azuka, and then they removed some of their, they made it very specific for identity processes for obvious reasons, just being Okta. And again, people that use Okta Workflows, they love the platform because they can do all the stuff without needing to write code.
It sounds like it's almost like no code for enterprise service bus, not so much for front end.
Yeah, so it has no front end at all, right?
Yeah.
And I actually almost like this. I like the automation side more than the UI. I don't know, if I find that UI is always more challenging, even with the no-code tools. I love the automation. There is no UI. You don't need to show it to anyone. Do you like how it looks or not?
And to me, it's a really perfect fit for no code, especially in the Okta scenario where you're basically building on top of an existing relationship that Okta already has. And I mean, Okta's not cheap. So anyone that's already paying for Okta is a large company that is looking at the cost that it takes to do all these things and saying, I think we could save money. We could do workflows and we don't have to have people writing code or people whose job it is to do all this boring stuff.
Yeah. Do you remember Yahoo Pipes?
Yeah, I do.
I loved Yahoo Pipes so much.
You said you loved Yahoo Pipes?
Yeah, it was so great.
So, I mean, it's kind of at a high level, I mean, it has a lot of similarities how it works, right? You you put various things together. And so that's how Okta Workflows works. Yeah, I know, I like it. Again, especially the automation side. Again, we talked about UI, so there are a lot of UI no-code builders. I mentioned there's the Webflow is a big one. There is Softer. It's a younger startup, and there are a few others. But automation is really neat. How you can automate things, and just to run, whatever, daily, weekly, hourly, or once a month, or again trigger when an event occurs in your system.
So with respect to the workflows, when you are setting this up, does this occur in the browser? And also, is this a cloud-based system or is this on-prem? Do you have on-prem solutions, or how does that work?
Yeah, it's all running in the browser. So there's no on-prem solution because it's Yeah, it's running in the browser, and you build in the browser, and then there's a button, you turn on the flow, right? It's on, and then depending on how it's triggered, right? So the two main ways, right? It's either an event occurs, and there are a lot of events. I mean, there are probably 50 different events just in Octa that you can trigger the event. The other connectors, again, like if you take, Google Workspace or Office 365, they have less events based on which you can trigger. Or you can do a schedule. Now, another way you can, and actually this is also a really cool one, is you can invoke a flow via an API call. So you can like a webhook. So you can have another system trigger a flow via an API call.
Nice.
Nice.
So you kind of have so I imagine in the web browser, there is an input and then there's an output type workflow where you can connect the systems that way.
Exactly. So yeah, they're called cards. So every card is a step, and there are two types of cards. Is a connector. A connector is usually an API call to another system. So Octa be one of them, or Google or Slack or Workday or Jira or anything else. And so a card will expose any number of API calls, right? Now, if a particular card doesn't have all the API calls that the underlying provider supports, there is a way to actually write the call itself. So to do kind of a manual call. So that's type number one. And then number two is there are a lot of cards for manipulating data. So you create strings, you work with lists, you work with objects, you do math. So once you use it for a little bit, you realize, oh, wow, this is almost like a full programming language. You've got all these API calls you can make. You can do a custom API call, and you've got all these cards to work with, strings, objects, lists. And it becomes a pretty powerful platform.
Sounds like it.
And then you put them all together. So you do one step, like one card, and then you visually connect them. That's how you pass data from card to card. So you make a call to to Jira, you get some information, and then the next card might be, I don't know, a list. And then you take the data from Jira, and you create a list. And then from the list, you can do something else. And yeah, it's really neat.
Are there constructs like programming constructs like loops or
yes,
things like that?
Exactly. Yeah, it's called a helper flow.
Oh, interesting.
So when you get a list of users, right, and of course with Octa, you mostly work with users. And I said, let's say you get all the users. Let's say you want to get all the active users, but you want to check when was the last time. So they're active in the system, but you want to check when was the last time they signed into the system or into an application. And then you iterate over each user and you check when was the last time they signed in. So that would be a loop.
Gotcha. It just occurred to me that in a lot of ways, this is similar to the way that kids learn programming these days, using block-based programming, where you have like a block with inputs and outputs, essentially, and you string together a whole bunch of blocks to do some work. So my kids do Scratch a lot, which is it's an MIT project, but it's free, and you go there, you can make all these little things. Of course, they're not nearly as cool as an enterprise workflow, but you can. There are inputs and outputs, and usually they are like something from someone clicks a button and you do something, but it doesn't have to be. And there are actually even blocks for doing AI stuff. So like basically, you can write a block and it can do whatever. And then there's a lot of other tools for helping kids learn how to code that are block-based. So it's interesting to me because I think even for people who won't probably become programmers, like my son might, my daughter probably won't, but she could if she wanted to, but it's not something she's particularly interested in doing. But if she ever comes across a no-code tool later on, it'll totally make sense to her because she will have seen the sort of block-based way of building an application before.
It's that kind of logic that sets
Yeah.
in, and knowing how to do that. Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
It's blocks. It's like Legos putting together Legos. Exactly. But if you think, like, again, we've been using no-code tools. Again, perhaps it's just we were not calling them no-code tools for a good time. I mean, like WordPress, right? I mean, like their newer version uses blocks now. So again, that's I look at it as a no-code tool, right? You don't have to worry about setting up a blog. I mean, of course you could if you wanted to, but you just create an account and you start publishing.
Wow.
Yeah, I guess the same goes for like Squarespace or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of tools that perhaps are not necessarily called no-code. Again, I think I said it's more like a marketing. It's like, but these visual tools where, we just sort of use them without really not necessarily needing to know what's happening behind the scene.
I have a question, Max. So you mentioned there's no on-prem, it's browser-based. Is there an IDE plugin available for Octa, like some JetBrains or Eclipse plugin you can install that lets you do it, work with the same design language, but from a desktop environment? Or
yeah, it's all browser based. Yeah, so you have to you go to the Octa dashboard as an admin, and then there's an option to launch workflows. So yeah, it's all browser based.
Interesting. Yeah, no, this is great stuff. I mean, and so are you like involved with the customer engagement side, or you actually work on developing the workflows for Octa, the technology itself, or are you a bit of both, or how's your?
Yeah, so my mission is to grow the community, to grow and scale the community. So that's my job.
Cool.
And so yeah, I mean they are of course customers.
Yes.
But I kind of come from the community side. So kind of what I do is we have a Slack channel where people just hang out and they just ask questions and they help each other. I also create a lot of content. Right? Nice. I mean, that's one good way to scale. Because again, the platform is so powerful is that people, when they start with it, it's like, okay, how do I do this? I mean, and so they need a lot of how-to guides, how to build with workflows. So I've been publishing a lot of content and how to do things.
So what do you feel like are you essentially like a developer advocate but you don't really have developers, you have more like power users as your opinion?
Yeah, no, exactly. So yeah, the people that these are mostly IT administrators that I work with, but I mean, I think from developer advocacy perspective, there's really no difference. I mean, my goal is to help them be successful, and it doesn't matter if that person is a team administrator or a developer. I mean, makes no difference to me. Right.
We had Matt Rabel on a couple months ago, and I because for him I had more specific questions because I've been working with Octa like now, so I was like, but I one of the things I noticed, and I mentioned this to him, is that you go and you'd read like the documentation on the Octa website, like the main documentation, and it's okay. It's okay. It's enough to make you think you know what you're doing, and then you start doing it and you're like, wait, I'm missing like some information. And then there's stuff that he would write, which were mostly blog entries and stuff. And I ran across Matt a lot on GitHub, like when I'd be looking at like a library or an example or something, I'd be like, oh, there's Matt. And he's responsive, like I could ask a question, or I'd be able to see him in GitHub comments and questions. But I'm wondering, you've now been doing this sort of similar roles across 3 different companies now, right? How do you see like the synergy between like the normal, like, here's our developer documentation versus here are the people who are actually dealing with developers and know what their questions are? Because I think there's a bit of they're not always the same team. And I'm not sure there's always synergy along those lines.
Yeah, I mean, in general, I think this probably falls sort of under, developer experience. I mean, just in general, I mean, I think you need to have a good quality documentation. I mean, it's just, it doesn't need to be perfect from day one, but I think you need to improve it, just bit by bit, all the time. But I think just the way I look at Okta Workflows. So again, if you go to Okta Workflows today to the documentation, you're going to see more like an API reference. So it's going to tell you how each card works. Or I mean, using a Java example, it's going to basically be what each function does, right? And that's fine. I think that's needed, of course, because But I mean, if you only had the Java API reference, right? I mean, how do you put all these? How do you write something? How do you write a program? I mean, that would be a little bit more difficult, right? I mean, if you only had the API reference without any examples, nothing, right? So that's where I am writing a lot of the how-to guides. And I say, hey, you've got the API reference, but this is how you put all these cards together to actually build a solution, right? And the thing, again, programming languages is very similar, right? If you just had the JavaScript API, it would be pretty difficult to just start with that, right? Like, how do you put all these functions together to build something meaningful? And it's with no code, it's very similar. It's like, I know how this card works, right? I know how this card works, but how do you put them together? And this is where I come in.
You know what this is reminding me of is a lot of the AWS guides, that are like, okay, this is how you take one of our 4 billion different services and use it to create something that does what you want to do. So I've read several guides like that. How do you do this? Use this with that, and this, and this, and this, and then string together with lambdas, and magically you've done something cool. But it's the same sort of idea. It's like we have a set of building blocks, and you need someone to help you sort of figure out how to put them together.
It's also
Yeah, exactly. And of course, once you're more comfortable, then of course you will go back to the reference many times, probably, right, to understand how a particular card works, and the little details of the implementation. And
another good example is.
Yeah.
So you say. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, you need the documentation, right? You need some getting started guides, and you need a lot of the how-to guides where people actually see how to solve a particular problem.
And we've all probably looked at if this then that. That application is a very similar type structure, probably, right?
Yeah,
because
exactly.
They've got all the examples, and here's some examples of things you can do, and then that kind of gets your mind going. And it's one of those things where I think you have to have a specific task that you're trying to accomplish in mind in order to get things going. You have to have some ideas of what you want to be able to accomplish. It's not something that you could just jump into and start creating things, because you definitely have to have an end result that you're trying to achieve, I think.
Correct. And so what I do, and so we have a team that they hold office hours. So anyone can join and they can ask a question, and then people help them. So what I do, those office hours are being recorded. We don't publish them, but they're just for internal purpose. So I watch those office hours and listen to them, and then I take the questions that people ask. So I don't come up with my own ideas usually. Or sometimes I can, but I usually take the questions and then I publish a how-to guide for those questions. Because, you all know that if one person has this question, then it's very likely other people have very similar questions, if not the same type of question. So this has been working great. The office hours, they run them weekly, 2 or 3 times a week. So the number of content that's being sort of generated for me, or ideas for content, is all the time. And then I take the question, and then I publish a how-to guide for that question. And of course, the other thing, sometimes people share their screens, and sometimes they share sort of sensitive or proprietary information, and that's why we only record for internal purposes. We don't publish them. But of course, when I answer the question, it's just a generic question.
You don't put proprietary information in your
I stopped. I got an email from the lawyers.
Nice. I know this is tangential, but I just had this like flashback to random conferences with Max over the years. Thank you for joining, Matt. Appreciate it. Max, excuse me. I'm sorry. I have a friend named Matt, a coworker named Matt. So for some reason in my head today, they're merging with your name, Matt. So
you're on Zoom, and I merged the names.
Yes. We should probably start moving along. I think we're coming up on over an hour. I had a couple of the items I wanted to just bring up briefly. I don't know if you guys had any more. I think Josh, you had something about Jakarta EE10 that you want to talk about.
The main thing I wanted to mention is that it's pending release. I think that they're going through the final stages of getting this Jakarta EE10 out the door. So just stay tuned. It's going to be exciting times here pretty soon. I'm looking at it to be something probably within the next month or so, in my opinion, but I don't think there are any hard dates.
Yeah, and for those who haven't been following, Jakarta EE10 is the first like major Jakarta EE release with new features. So first it was like, let's get into Eclipse. Then it was like, let's change the namespace because Oracle told us to. And now it's like, oh, we can now do some new features. So so to me, this is the one, like if you have some old code you need to upgrade now, like Jakarta EE10 is like the good one to do it with if you haven't done it yet.
Yeah, and something very interesting to kind of go along with the conversation we had earlier. There are some JSF updates in Jakarta EE10. One of the coolest things I think that's been put into it is the way that you can now develop JSF pages with just Java code. So it's a lot like GSP used to be.
Dude, I totally missed
like
that. That's in there.
Wow.
Yeah.
You don't know how many prototypes there were of that over the years, at least 2 or 3 from different people trying out different libraries. I haven't even done
Is it all hooked in by annotations, or how's that working?
I'm not 100% certain on how it's done. I don't know the details of it, but I did see there was a blog post about it, and I've looked just a little bit online about it. I've not dug too far into it.
Well,
But it's
That's
definitely
really cool.
interesting to see that there's still, and especially me, because I do use JSF every day. It's interesting to see that they are moving it along.
Yeah, and I kind of like, to me, it's been an interesting use case because it's a good example of how technologies don't have to die just because there's something new. I mean, as long as it wasn't a bad technology to begin with, and I know JSF had its detractors, every technology does, but I think it's cool that it's just kind of just moving along. It exists. It's an option. You can use it or not.
Yep, and as Max had mentioned earlier, especially for those customers, the enterprises that they have legacy systems or older systems that need to be maintained.
Yeah.
Those systems don't have to die or move on to something completely different. They can just be brought up to speed with the modern versions of JSF and whatnot.
Although I'll tell you, their versions are modern. I mean, I'm working on a project now where they upgraded to JSF 2.3, but Java 8. And it's like, oh my God, this is your big upgrade. It's like for a government agency. It's like
government doesn't move. Oh, and government had I think it just passed the House, and I'll try to link to that. But it was about open source, that no contractor is allowed to install any kind of open source without clearance or first scanning. And it seems to be like a dangerous way to just like clear out open source altogether. Like and I'll try to find the bill. It's worded in one of those kind of suspicious ways where they're like, we don't trust open source, so any kind of vendor who works with us needs to make sure that none of these open source libraries are going to be detrimental to any kind of government entity.
I'm very
which,
curious about that. 'cause
yeah, I
have
know.
a lot of government clients. So,
Yeah, I know.
I have a lot of government clients. So
I've been an American for like 50 years since I was born, and I know how our government works. It looks good on paper, but what does it really mean?
exactly.
And I think it's locking out open source
Yeah.
and opening things up more for secret proprietary kind of software vendors. I mean, everything's secure if you don't know about it, right? So, but
I see the point.
if you
I
don't
mean,
publish any, that's the thing about open source. You have to publish. They're on the CVE database. That's what it was. So no installation of open source software if that is on a CVE database. And I'll post the link, and I'm just kind of paraphrasing. So I own it if I get it all wrong. But yeah, and I thought that one was a little bit underhanded for the open source community. The thing about open source is that everything is open. If there is a bug, if there's something going wrong, everybody knows about it, and that's what makes it more secure.
Yeah.
If you're some, hack job vendor from who knows where, and they deploy some software, maybe maliciously, backdoor or someone else like that, then hey, that's going to be okay. It was never in the CVE database, right?
Yeah.
Danger.
I hear you, Dano. Definitely, it doesn't make sense to throw the baby with the bathwater. I mean, we depend on open source. Every industry depends on open source. You can't just say no more open source. The problem I think they're trying to address, and I haven't read any of the laws or proposed changes or any guidelines or anything like that, but the reality is supply chain attacks are a prevalent issue, right?
Right.
Yes, just because something's open source doesn't mean you're actively vetting the code on a daily basis, right? Unless you have that built into your CI/CD pipeline with some kind of software composition analysis, right? If you do, then great. Yes, you're checking the CVE database all the time. You're checking you're scanning the code that you're using, the third-party open source code that you're pulling into your code base. You're actively scanning it every single time you build your app. Yes, if you're doing that, I agree. Doesn't make sense to throw it. Then if someone lost control of their GitHub account and now a malicious actor is poisoning the code base, or sometimes developers sabotage their own code base. They decide, I don't want to maintain this anymore. I'm gonna shut down this project, and so things happen, whether it's intentional or not, or whether it's malicious or not. Sometimes things happen, and third-party code is no longer reliable, right? But how do you know when that happens? Like, you need the visibility. So that's why there's tools like Veracode does software composition analysis. Nexus open source edition doesn't do it, but if you upgrade to the commercial edition, if you use an artifact repository manager, it should be scanning those dependencies for you as well. And Java, obviously, Maven, the ecosystem is huge. Who's really scanning all that code? Like, we trust each other, but is somebody scanning that code and checking for security issues? Are they getting triaged? Are they getting reported to the maintainers? Like, there's a lot of concerns. And you saw like the SolarWinds attack, right? Microsoft, or they were affected, right? The supply chain was attacked. The vendors, trusted vendors, own code was shipping with viruses, right? So how do you address that issue? I agree. I'm never want to say don't use open source. We live and die with open source. It's our lifeblood, right? We need it. So the question is, how do we make it more secure, right? So that's why, Octa, these tools, and Auth or Auth0. So that was really great to see Octa acquire that company, because security focused technology company, that's always a good thing, right?
I will say though, I think just as a minor data point, Auth0 is sort of a competitor, at least for the base. At least this is my understanding, Max, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but at least for the base, like programmatic authentication side of things, not for a lot of the other stuff Okta does, like the overall identity management stuff, but at least in terms of like having an API where you can authenticate and get a job back. I got the impression Auth0 was a competitor, but like had a different market. Like their market was more like straight up developers, whereas Okta was more like, the enterprise market. But I've only worked with Okta, so I can't really say for sure, but that's my understanding. So just to move along, I'm going to try out a new product. So Payara, which is a Jakarta EE and micro profile vendor. They have a new product out called Payara Cloud. And I was very intrigued by this. So Payara Cloud basically says, okay, give me your Jakarta EE or micro profile app, and then we will run it as a serverless app on top of Azure as our backend. But they're basically managing it. So they're automatically handling your Kubernetes instances, provisioning your nodes and pods, routing, assigning SSL certificates, monitoring, configuring, deployment, everything. And when I saw this, I was like, this is actually what I've sort of been looking for. Is there have been other things that I've seen, like Elastic Beanstalk, Amazon had a while ago. There's of course sort of automated. I know Amazon, and I'm sure Google and Microsoft has the ability to automatically, dynamically increase your cluster of K8s, or for Amazon Kubernetes or Elastic Container Service ECS instances, whatever. But the idea where I could just take the WAR and throw it in there and have it manage all of that stuff is really appealing. And there's also, I did a quick look, I think this would work for Spring applications as well. I don't think it would just be, a Jakarta EE application. So I'm thinking about trying this out. I signed up for the demo. Right now it's free. I don't think they've announced pricing yet. And I'm sure you've got to pay for the Azure stuff underneath. But it sounds like a pretty cool idea. And I think it's got, because I have had a few clients that are like, we've got this application, we're not going to rewrite it. It's in, Jakarta EE, it's a web app, whatever, and it runs, it works. Maybe we have some Spring stuff, but we need to move to the cloud. And this is a slam dunk for them. So
I'm hoping that I've seen this too, and it looks very appealing to me as well, especially in the use case for presentations and demonstrations. I would love to be able to just throw something into the cloud real quick to show how to use it, or for presentation, like I mentioned. So I'm hoping that they've got some tier that can be used for development, presentation, testing, that type of a thing.
You've got a really good point. I was thinking, more from a product or service perspective, but you're right. From that perspective, it could be very handy too. I could see it for a workshop that I'm doing.
Yeah, I used to use the Google App Engine. I don't know if you remember that thing.
I remember that.
Yeah.
But that was pretty fun because you could definitely do quick demos with that. It was a nice thing to quickly show off some code and how things work together and whatnot. I could see this being something similar.
Yeah,
Google has killed off too many good things.
Yeah,
I mean,
it seems to
even
be
Yahoo,
different.
Max was talking about Yahoo pipes, and I'm like, yeah, I remember that too. We had some goods, man. We lived well. We had a good life.
We did.
And then they took it away from us. And this is where we're at now.
Definitely.
Now we're in expensive Kubernetes in the cloud.
Yep, it's true. I wanted to mention also that Google, I'm sorry, not Google, another big company, Github CoPilot is out of beta now. So I was a beta a member, and if you don't remember us talking about CoPilot, it's basically helps you write code because it's scanned millions or billions of lines of open source. It can sort of guess what you're about to type, and it's really creepy. And I've been a beta tester, and it's and so I got a notice saying it's out of beta now, and I'm like, I'm not sure I really want to pay for it. But then they're like, it's $10 a month. I'm like, and then they said, it also integrates not just with VS Code but also with IntelliJ, and I'm like, okay, I'll try it.
Maybe, I don't know. It's crappy code, man.
Well, I'm a little, I think
I guess it's no code as well. I don't know how Max thinks about
I don't know about
CoPilot.
that.
I mean, you're not coding, right? You're just like factor, and then it's just like, oh, you want to write a factorial? Here it is.
Yeah, I'm still, torn about it, but it's also early days, right? So it's one of those things where I do think eventually it'll be at a point where unless you use something like that, you're going to not be as productive as the next person.
Yeah.
Same as if you know all the shortcuts in the IDE, you're going to be faster than someone who doesn't.
Sure.
And speaking of which, Daniel tweeted something that caught my interest. You mentioned Control F12 in IDEA. What does that do? I'm on Mac. I
Oh,
don't have
Command
that.
F12? No,
Was it
for
Command?
Apple, it's Command F12.
Ah,
Go to a file, go to a big file with a lot of methods, and do
Okay.
Command F12. Okay, we're going to watch Ian get surprised right now.
I'm trying. I
Right.
think that's the problem. My keyboard shortcuts are probably different. Is
Yeah.
it all the IDE
Good.
IntelliJ products or
This
just?
is really handy for
I think-
package.json.
Yeah. Oh, it is. Yeah, it works for JSON, it works for Java, and it works for just about anything else. It's just a quick structure, so that way you can just jump to the methods really quickly. I did a seminar on IntelliJ and some of the shortcuts, and someone was like, "I really have a really big class. How can I navigate?" And I told them the structure window, tool window, and then afterwards, I'm like, "Yeah, that was a kind of crappy answer." So I was like, "There has to be something better."
Yeah, it's better.
And it's Command F12, boom, just like open the window and go to it.
So here's my question. So I've always been bad with shortcuts. I know like enough to get by. I'm not clueless, but like I know I could be like a master, with my IDE or whatever tool if I can remember shortcuts. And I've been trying to figure out the best way to do it. I've got that shortcut extension or plugin for IntelliJ that tells you, hey dummy, you
Oh,
could
you
have
can do
typed,
this. That's
command
right.
whatever, and that would done what you tried to do. But I'm thinking like I want like a reference sheet, like a cheat sheet in front of me that's like this. And I want it to change depending what app I'm using. So I want it to be like, okay, this is like a sheet sheet of all the shortcuts that you should be using.
Well, all IntelliJ has the help menu and keyboard shortcuts PDF. Just pick one a day. Good.
Pick one a day. Okay. All
That's
right.
what I do.
Fair
I'm
enough.
slow man. I need it to saturate once a day. Yeah, that's right.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
That's probably a better idea for me.
That sounds like a good use case for the top bar on the MacBook Pros. The
Yeah.
one that's the dynamic keys. If it showed the shortcuts for your particular application there, that would be kind of cool.
It would be cool.
I know
Of course.
you can set those buttons to be whatever you'd like or whatever. So that's probably
Right.
a wiser choice, but
But
it would be
Yeah.
kind of cool.
I
Oh,
got
and
the
since
new
we're
Mac now,
on the
so-
topic of IntelliJ, Command Shift E. Beautiful. Que suave. Beautiful. Absolutely.
Oh.
Que bella.
That one works for me. Recent locations.
Recent locations, things you've edited or read.
I
And
like it.
I think there's a checkbox for things that you've written. So if you just want to go back to
Oh,
where you've
wow.
written.
Oh,
yeah.
wow. That's great. I had the last edit location. I have it mapped to one of my mouse buttons, and I always go back.
Yeah, don't touch your
last
mouse.
That
Don't
is
you do it.
nice. All right.
Yeah,
So
that's a beautiful
next
one.
episode, Dano's going to give us a version of his talk about IntelliJ shortcuts.
I just did a full day, and
Whole
I was
day?
thinking I could fill a whole day easy and still run out of time. Easy
Oh my God.
for IntelliJ. Well, these are like workshops where I have them do it themselves too. But
Gotcha.
yeah,
Gotcha.
but
Wow.
yeah, totally.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, I could segue to the latest news
Sure.
on JetBrains.
Please do.
So JetBrains, I guess, is fully detached from Russia.
Wow. That's a big deal.
Yeah. So according to this article that I translated from Russian, Studovitsia, that's the only word I know in Russian. But anyway, they registered, I guess, in the Netherlands. I tweeted about this. Someone's like, well, their headquarters is in Prague. But then I'm like, well, the article says they registered in the Netherlands. I think Europeans do that sort of thing where they register in the country with the lowest tax rate, maybe, and then they have a headquarters somewhere else. I don't know how Europeans work. But if they act like Americans, I think Americans do that all the time because they register their corporation in Nevada for the low tax rate, but they operate out of Ohio or whatever.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a big deal. That's very smart for them, I think, though.
Could be.
I finally got the show structure to work. Sorry.
Yeah, cool. What do you think? Command F12.
It's great. I had it mapped to the Eclipse version, which was Command O. So that's why Eclipse has a similar feature.
Right.
That's cool. Yeah. Show structure is great.
Oh my God.
IntelliJ.
Okay. I just saw your link for JetBrains Space. I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, there's a new product. Josh is the one that told me about that, and we were trying to figure out what it is, and it looks like, and Josh may have a different opinion, but it looks like a Jira killer to manage everything, all your big software projects.
Exactly. Yep. That's what it looks like.
I don't know. I mean, it looks
We could
like
be
a
wrong.
Jira
We
and
just
Bit-
found about it today.
it looks like a
What the heck is
Jira-
that, man?
It looks like a Jira and Bitbucket or GitHub killer,
Yeah.
and with Team City thrown in. know,
Yeah.
Hey, have you guys tried Code with me? JetBrains Code with me?
I've seen.
No,
it, but I've
I
not
need
tried
someone.
it.
I feel like going to a middle school dance and no one wants to dance with me. And I'm there on the wall and I'm there, just listening to music, and I don't have the courage to ask someone to dance but yeah, but it looks cool. It looks like a blast.
It
Yeah,
looks
if
like
you to use that the dance analogy, if your partner is moving at 1/4 of the speed that you are, that's a pretty much a good analogy
That's
for how it works.
Yeah.
Network issues, man, latency kills it, but it's a great
That's
idea.
fine.
I like the fact two developers can share the code, like independent mouse keyboard control, but you're working on the same code. I've seen it go off the rails a couple times, but it's again latency issues, but that's a real need. I think like pair programming,
Sure.
remote pair programming is hard to do.
Yeah.
Recently we had some success on Teams doing that, like where you can actually request keyboard and mouse control, and you see your mouse moving with the other person's mouse, and you separate a little your initials are next to your mouse pointer, so you can see who's doing what. But the potential is there, I think, for
Right. IntelliJ has a blame thing that came out in the last few versions. It's kind of like a little bit of an annoyance because on the gutter it shows who did what, but that may be useful. It's still weird that we have blame. SVN used to have blame and praise, which did the same thing. They were synonyms. So you could do SVN praise and it would show all the people who committed a code on a particular, file that you did. But
that
Git only has blame.
Blame's been there
Yeah.
forever though in IntelliJ, dude.
yeah, and the
been
inline
there
blame
for a
is
long
great
time.
too. Like you can just click on a line of code and
Inline
see,
blame.
like, no, that's what it is. You see who wrote that code, that line of code. Like
No, I know. It just sounds like something grounds for divorce.
Yeah. I have one more IntelliJ aside, actually two more.
Yeah.
This JetBrains Space thing it looks a lot to me like the Atlassian play, but they actually have a bit of a stronger integrated tool story if they manage to pull it off. Although I honestly, whenever I see someone with a new thing like this, I'm like, I'll look at it in a couple of years. Because it's not trivial what they're building. But the other thing I like to say is that people listening to the show know that I like VS Code as well. I have been using VS Code for a while on a project, and honestly, and I think I mentioned this in the last podcast, it's Git integration, even with Git Lens, was getting to me. So I switched back to IntelliJ, and I'm so much happier with the Git stuff. And there's of course, there's things about VS Code I like better, but in general. And also, I realized I don't like the Microsoft design language very much. The whole flat look thing they have going on.
Yeah. It's kind of cool that you can install plugins without restarting the IDE. I have to say, the other issue though is you don't know which plugin is the authoritative one. There's 15 Git plugins. I'm exaggerating. At least 3 or 4 or 5 different Git plugins. Which one am I supposed to use for just the basic Git?
You were under exaggerating. It's more than 15.
Is it?
No, I don't know. It just seems there's so many plugins, but you're right. You're like there's the Java one, like even the standard Java one, and then you have the test debugger for Java, and then you have a test runner for Java, and you're like, Jesus Christ, like what the hell, man? Just like
the ecosystem is a bit of a mess, but I mean, I'm sure if you spend the time, you weed through the different plugins.
And I think that's the thing though. It's like, I don't have extra time. I don't have extra time to waste finding a plugin to do something that is like using Git. It's just not, maybe
DevRels for JetBrains are gonna love you. I don't have time for this plugin shit. No, I'm just kidding. Max got me on the thing. Max was asking beforehand, is it okay to cuss? And now I just want to cuss all the time. No, but yeah. Oh no, I totally agree with you. What do you have time for?
Nothing.
It's absolutely right.
Yeah.
So,
All right. So speaking of time, we got
We
through
running up?
JetBrains. Yep. I think we got through all of our stuff. Okay. So Max, we do picks on this show. Do you have a
Yeah.
pick for us? I'm putting you
You
on
have
the
a
spot.
pick, so like
Do you want to
software
think about it?
things. Yeah, software
Yeah.
things that you recommend for us.
Or
we're just gonna go,
non-software
wow.
things, or
Yeah.
just things you think are cool, like you got a new hat,
Productivity
or whatever it
things,
is.
good set of headphones, good set of
Actually,
earbuds.
I need a good set of headphones because I use the Apple.
I noticed, but I see
I-
people on like news shows with those things now. So I'm like, whatever, they must be good enough.
I would love actually a recommendation for headphones and a good mic.
I use Aftershock, so that's and I think I posted that before.
Thank you.
But it's a very lightweight. Let me take my cowboy hat off. It's like this. I don't know if you can see that, but it's very, very lightweight Aftershocks, and it has a little microphone to it. It's not perfect, but it does pretty well.
Yeah, he's a little more hip than I've got this this fancy podcasting mic.
Yeah. So what kind of mic is that?
I wish I could remember. It's a very popular brand whose name is totally blanking on me right now. So I'll add to notes. It's I know when you hear the brand, you will have heard of it before, but I forgot what it's called. But I like it a lot. Obviously, it's not as lightweight as what he has. So, and these are just random. I mean, these are Bose headphones. These aren't special headphones. Huh?
Is it Yeti?
No, it's more of a it's Australian. I'm trying to find it. Australian blah blah blah.
I'm using a Yeti. I like that mic.
I know people,
Nice.
yeah, that's a popular one. Yeah, I don't know. Australian. It's sad that I forgot the name of the brand of my mic. But anyways, when I remember, I'll tell you, Max.
Sounds good. Yeah, no worries. My pick, I'll go with something that's non-technology related. I mean, yeah, non-work related. So if you check out books from the library, and perhaps you already know this, and perhaps your listeners might know this, but there is a cool app called Libby that you can check out books from your local library.
Yes.
I have heard of that.
Yes.
I don't
You just
know if I've
need
used
your
it.
library card from your local library.
And you can have multiple library cards. So I have 2, and you can have, I think you can have more if you want. But yeah, you can check out books to read in the Libby app itself, or you can send it to Kindle, and you can also check out audiobooks.
Nice.
Yeah.
It's pretty neat. Yeah, it's called Libby.
Someone tweeted a long time ago, wouldn't it be great if there was a Netflix, but for books? And someone's like, I think it's called your library.
No,
But yeah.
exactly. And think the fact that you can have multiple library cards. Like I have one where I live in Contra Costa County. I have one from San Francisco Library. I know people that have from like Los Angeles, because sometimes libraries there's like one library might not have the book that you want, but then that library will have the book you want.
Right.
But yeah, I use it all the time. So if you like checking out stuff from the library, then
That's a good one.
check it out.
Definitely.
I love it. That's a great one there, Max.
So my pick is iTerm, which is just a terminal replacement for the Mac.
Oh yeah.
But it's free, and like once I started using it, I can't imagine not using it.
iTerm.
Totally.
Same here.
Yeah.
And by the way, let me add another pick to that. If you're presenting, Control L. I see so many people still typing clear as fast as they can to clear the screen. So if you're presenting, just Control L on your terminal.
Interesting.
That's really handy because I do type
Oh,
clear.
is it? Okay.
Yeah.
I thought that was like common knowledge, but yeah,
No,
Control
no,
L.
no. It's not. It's
Dan
all
was
right,
the
good.
shortcut master.
I'm telling you, I
Or
suck with the
shortcut master.
shortcuts. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm
But
like- I'm like an overweight dude, but my fingers are like super lightweight and Olympic in fashion. It's just the way I just like.
oh, that's just amazing.
Gotta get you like a holster and then pull these shortcuts out of. I got
Oh
one for
yeah,
that.
that's right.
oh, nice.
That's right.
I
Oh,
love
that'd be
that.
fantastic.
But like I'm sure iTerm does a million things I don't use. It's that
Oh,
good.
same here.
But
Yeah.
at the very least, like I have like a whole bunch of tabs open, and I save them and I can reopen them. So it's like I have little workspaces with like tabs open to whatever, and
Yeah.
it's definitely highly recommended. So
Right.
Nice.
Excellent. So I got a, or go ahead, Ian.
No, it's
Gherkin.
Gherkin. All right, let's do it. So my pick is definitely development related. It's Cucumber and Gherkin, behavior driven development, BDD. So you guys are familiar with JUnit, TestNG. You've done your unit testing, TDD, test driven development for many years, I'm sure. BDD is a different approach. So it's more high level, behavior focused. To give an example, on the Cucumber website, you talk about a feature. For example, the feature is eating too many cucumbers may not be good for you. So that's your feature statement. Then you have a scenario. Eating a few is no problem. Then you have your BDD statements. Given Alice is hungry, when she eats 3 cucumbers, then she will be full. So given, when, then. So basically it's a simple language with some keywords that you use to write scenarios that describe use cases and behavior of the application or the system, whatever you're testing. Well, what's really cool is for Angular. So long story short, Protractor was Angular's, Google's kind of built-in end-to-end testing framework. Protractor is no more. It's gone. It was replaced by other tools. They recommend Cypress. So Cypress is alternative to Selenium, performs very similar kind of role in the unit automated testing world. Functional testing library or framework is really great. Cypress, by the way, I really like it. BDD with Cypress. So Cucumber, Gherkin, and Cypress together and Angular, it was, for me, was like mind blown. Basically, we're able to write these BDD statements and test the application in using like the language that an end user would understand. So for me, that was a real game changer. Instead of this bottom up, like DOM manipulation stuff, DOM traversal for testing your UI, you still have to do that, but you have this nice layer on top that's really simple in the end user's, vocabulary. And so Cucumber and Gherkin for me was real nice thing to see working properly. And that's my pick.
And you don't have the boilerplate like you do Selenium. So I've used Cypress and taught about Cypress. I had to like really quickly get up to date on it. I'm like, holy moly. And like even JavaScript elements, you don't have to add like all that extra junk like you do with Selenium. No, like it recognizes everything.
It's asynchronous. It looks like asynchronous code, but it's asynchronous, and that's really cool about it.
That's a big deal, because that was one of the issues with Selenium. Is like, oh, I need to wait. I need to wait.
Yes.
Wait.
Yeah.
So I have we'll try and do this quickly, but Max, so how do people test low code stuff?
You don't.
Or no code stuff.
That's a good one. Yeah, that's it's going to be specific to every tool. I mean, with Okta Workflows, you just have to run the flow. I mean, there's a test button, and you just have to run it and see, just see how the flow works. Now, you can usually you deploy, you don't run it in production, but you develop in kind of we call it like a preview environment, where it's not your actual users, and then you can test there, and then once it works, you can move it to production. Again, specifically with Okta Workflows, it does have like a history view where you can see for every execution, you can see how data passes from card to card.
Oh, that's cool. Okay.
It's also pretty neat. Yeah. So every execution will show all the data. And like you make a request, for example, or you load a list of users, they're going to be in JSON format. And then you can see how it passes from card to card.
Wonderful.
Yeah, but that's how you test. I mean, there's really no other tooling. I mean, you can add some error handling into the flow itself, but that's not really testing.
Right. Okay.
Cool.
Yeah, it's probably not as straightforward testing some of these tools.
I was hoping you would answer like, got to go, like when we ask, how do you do unit testing for no code? Got to go, everybody. I'm just kidding. No, but that's excellent.
All right, cool. All right, so we got here.
Yeah, I got a couple of them too. So I was doing a architecture design class, and I was talking about bounded context within DDD. and what a bounded context is, and how that should reflect within your software, even if you're on a monolith, so that way you could break out microservices a little bit better. Anyways, that was part of my full day workshop that I had. But someone said, so what's your view on, the link doesn't work, but it was, what's your view on doing features, doing Java packages as features rather than infrastructure, which I don't do. So like in my, code base, I have DAO, I have models, I have, those are my packages, but it should be the features, which should be, my company accounting, my company dot sales, my company dot human resources, my company dot. So that should be done like at the feature level of your particular software. So that's what I was doing. And so now I have to go reflect, go sit by a lake, throw some stones in it, and think about how I'm creating Java packages. So I'll fix that link on there, but I thought that was an interesting view on how we do Java packages or module names in our software. Should it be done by feature or should it be done by infrastructure?
Or can you do both?
Ooh, interesting. So something to think about. I don't have an official answer because I was just like given that yesterday. So I thought I'd provide that for everybody. Let's see. I have a couple of other things. I was told about Stack Blitz. Ian, you do a lot of JavaScript. Did you already know about this?
Yep. The name sounds familiar.
Okay. So I guess this is because I've been all about, doing code up online without the configuration. And I guess this one is get started with a JavaScript project as fast as you can using Stack Blitz. And you could do Angular, React, or whatever it is that you like.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
And it's really handy. It's great for doing demos and stuff, right?
Is it? Okay. Yeah, I've only heard about that. And then the other one that I've heard about that I need to put in practice, but it looks very awesome. It's called Rich CLI. Ooh, Max, it's almost like RichFaces. But now here you are years later, and I'm telling you about Rich CLI.
I like that.
Yeah, there we go. The circle is complete. Anyway, so Rich CLI is like your cat or bat. I don't even know if you know about bat. So you know what cat is. That shows the file. Concatenate shows the file. Bat shows your file in a color kind of scheme and makes it look really beautiful. It has gutters for the line numbers and it has the file name up top. So bat is much more preferable than cat. But I'm looking at Rich. And so Rich has the same sort of functionality, but supposedly has a whole lot more that I'm interested in. And so you can bring this in as part of your command line.
Nice. That sounds handy.
Yep.
Interesting.
All right. And then I'll stop there because I got too many awesome things to tell you. It'll never end.
Yeah, I thought I found my microphone, but
yeah. Oh, really quick there, Max.
Yes.
So we're about to embark on the World Cup. What are your views on the World Cup? I guess the U.S. is in officially, and who do you think will take it? Who was the surprise one? Last one, it was Bosnia, I think. Bosnia went all the way up to like second place, I think.
Wait, this was.
Or was it Croatia? Croatia.
It was 2018, wasn't it? Yeah, wasn't it Russia they made to semifinal?
I thought it was Croatia. I don't know. I don't remember anymore.
Well, you know what? I don't like this. I mean, the World Cup is in December this year, and just really, I don't like it. It was supposed to be in June.
Right, but it's in the southern hemisphere this time because it's in Saudi Arabia, right? Or it's
and it's super
it's on
hot
the
there.
equator. Yeah,
It's super hot. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like it should be just in June. It just, I don't know. I feel it's going to lose some of its, I don't know.
Yeah, we'll
being
see.
a World Cup, being in December, you know.
Right. So it was France versus Croatia in the final. So it was Croatia 4-2, and France took the final. And then third place, Belgium beat England 2-0. So England got pretty far that last time, but Russia did as well.
Quarterfinal. I think they made it to quarterfinals.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's right.
yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. We'll see. I mean, England made it to the final of European Championship,
That's right. They did well. Yeah.
so we'll see. But
So-
yeah, I always like Brazil. I mean, I
Who
think they
doesn't
did.
like Brazil?
Yeah, it's if they play well, it's pretty.
Right. It is.
If they
Yeah.
lose 7-1 to Germany, like remember when there was a couple
Oh
of
yeah, totally. I was
7, oh my
upset. I
God.
saw them all crying. It was horrible for them.
I watched the I watched the highlights again maybe a few months ago. Oh my God, I felt so bad for the people at the stadium.
What was the score again? Like 12-1
7-1.
or 12? What is it?
7-1.
7-1. Okay. For some reason I thought it was 12-1. Okay.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I felt so bad because I mean soccer is like a,
Sure.
that's Brazil. I mean that's
Right.
and
they were the host country.
and we're the
It's all
host,
taken
and
away.
then it's one thing to lose like 2-1 or something like in a normal score, but this is like that was.
7-1.
I mean, people were just devastated.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, we got two Americans here. I was like, I don't know what sport you're talking about.
I know only because my brother watches a lot of
Oh, really?
football. Yes.
Yeah, Ian, you go between Canada and Spain. Are you even into soccer at all?
Oh
I
yeah,
guess I don't
yeah.
know the-
No, it's a big
Okay.
deal here in Europe for sure. I mean, football
Yeah.
is a huge sport. I mean, in Canada, hockey is the only sport people really care about. I shouldn't say that; it's not fair. And there's a lot of sports that we like, but hockey's number one.
I know.
national
Let's
sport.
be honest, Canadians. That's right.
Well, yeah, but it's interesting because globally, football, I mean, soccer has so much, like it's millions
dominant.
more fans like
Right.
in hockey. So I mean, it's a niche. Well, it's not a niche sport, but hockey is
Niche.
not nearly as popular as soccer. I mean, globally.
Right.
Yeah.
Totally.
No, it's a big deal here, like in Europe, for sure. I enjoy it. Watch it on TV sometimes. I haven't been out to a match though,
Right.
yet.
Yep.
So
And we're getting there in the U.S. We have a lot of professional and farm leagues now here in the U.S. all over the place. So
Yeah, and
Nice.
things
we've
are
got
changing.
our women's team is really good too, which is
Yeah,
awesome.
great. Oh yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
Yeah, whenever my brother visits, he's like always trying to find like whatever. He's a big Chelsea fan. I'm trying to find the Chelsea games, and of course they're never on TV here, so he has to find them on the internet. Anyways, so I found my mic, Max. It's the Rode Podcaster USB dynamic microphone.
All right, thank you.
So, yeah, so I like it. And I think I got the idea of getting this mic from you, and then you, Dano, and then of course you got something completely different. So, but anyways, all right. So let's move along. So we just wanted to mention some of the other Pubhouse Network podcasts.
Yeah.
You can find all these at pubhouse.net. You can find Breaking into Open Source, which I still don't think has a new episode out, but
Nothing
It's
new
out
for a
there.
while.
Then Off Heap and Java Pubhouse are both. You guys are both monthly for those, right?
Yeah, Freddie and
Yeah.
Bob do the Pubhouse, and
Right.
I'm on the off heap. It's monthly, yes.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, and if I could, I forgot about this. Just want to give this as kind of like a pick as well, and just provide some news all in the same. Software Engineering Daily is one of my favorite podcasts. It's not part of our network, but it is very, very great, very technical, and they kind of have the same format as we do, where we, have a guest and talk about things. Of course, they do it more formal, but still a great podcast. Unfortunately, though, their founder and one of the head podcasters passed away in early July. But I think the podcast is still going strong. So give a listen to them. They have a lot of really good, excellent content, and worth checking out and putting that on your podcast list.
Cool. Yeah, I haven't heard of that one. Check that out. Nice. All right, so we are entering the fall conference season, and Max, if you have any no code or low code conferences you want to plug or events, feel free.
Yeah, it's called No Conf.
No conference.
I just had to. I'm sorry. I just had to.
I mean, I'd be kind of curious, like if there was one, if there was a local no code thing, I might check it out to see what's going
Totally.
on.
Yeah, so there's one, there's a conference, and my
There's a
dog
ghost
just,
behind you.
my dog just opened the closet.
Oh, it's your dog. I'm like, Max, run! I thought there was a ghost behind you.
I need to get it. 1 sec.
Look at that dog.
Yeah,
Put the snacks in there.
There's Max's house.
So there, and this is him.
Let me get that bumper.
He's big. He's 65 pounds.
Wow,
Nice.
nice.
So one conference, there was a conference called No Code Conf, it was by Webflow, but now they're renaming it this year to Webflow Conf.
Oh, man, that's a vendor. Now it's straight up vendor cons.
Yeah,
What?
yeah, it's kind of, I was a little bit disappointed.
Yeah.
That's right.
There are probably a number of smaller events that I don't even sort of remember or know their names.
Okay.
I know that there's one from Zapier. If you're familiar with Zapier, so it's
That
kind
makes
of also an
sense.
automation platform.
Yeah.
I think it's called ZipConnect or JustConnect. That's coming up in October.
Okay.
But I'm not sort of speaking or attending those conferences. I again, primarily focus on content creation, and I publish videos. So that's how I kind of tell people what I do these
Gotcha.
days.
Wow,
Gotcha.
cool.
All right. Well, September, Java Zone is happening in Oslo, Norway. I haven't been there probably like over 10 years, but maybe one day I'll go back. But that's always a great conference if you're in Europe. jconf.dev is jconf, is that by the
Critique and Vince.
yeah, okay, yes, Pratik events, right. So that's another Java conference, September 26th to 28th. Did I submit to that? I must not have submitted to that one. I can't even remember. I think I submitted, but I didn't get accepted. Anyways, I can't remember. Are either of you, is anybody speaking at that one?
I'm
at
speaking
that
of that one.
Okay. All right, cool. So if you want to see Josh or Dano, jconf dev, September, Chicago, Illinois.
Nice.
And the famous DevOps conference in Belgium is back in person, October 10th through 14th. They rejected my talks, but Dano or Josh, I don't know if either of you guys are.
No, European ones, I'm self-employed, so if they're gonna pay my way, then I'll do it, or at least help out.
Yeah.
I
know they used to do that, but I haven't been in DevOps Belgium in so long. I don't really know what their policy
yeah,
is.
if they're on my way or something like that, those can get kind of prickly for someone like me who's independent.
Yeah. But that's a great conference if you're in Europe. So Ian, you should go. Actually, they're sold out. They sold out in 5 minutes apparently.
Oh, wow.
But next year you can go.
Yes.
It's like buying an Apple product. You have to just click quickly when it comes out. Java 1 is actually Java 1. This is October 17th through 20th in Las Vegas, Nevada. There was a whole bunch of sort of weirdness about whether it was really Java 1 or just, Oracle calling part of Oracle Cloud World, they call it Java 1. But they actually are making a push to, it's not going to be exactly like the old days, but it is its own independent conference. I'm speaking there. There's lots of really popular Java folks going to be there. And Josh or Dana, are either of you guys going to be there?
I was thinking about it because I've never been, and they said that I would get a slot. Not that it matters, I'm not going because I don't have a slot, but they changed a few things around and how they organize things and what their budget is. So I was originally going to be there, but then I wasn't. So I was like, I'm going to go visit. But then customers were just like, ooh, can I have that week from you? And I'm like, no, yep, all right, there we go. So customers are like waving a paycheck at me. So I'm like, all right.
Yeah.
So maybe next time. I've never been to a Java 1, so.
Yeah, well, I'm looking forward to it. Josh, are you going?
Yeah, I'll be there this year. I did get a talk accepted, so
Nice.
looking
Which one?
forward to that. I'm speaking with Edwin Dirks on Jakarta EE and microprofile, so it should be
Oh,
good. We're doing a similar
nice.
talk for jConf, so I'll be able to see him twice in a month, which will be kind of
Yeah.
cool. He's from Netherlands, so yeah.
Have you been at a Java one or spoken at a Java one before? Oh, he froze.
I think he has.
Josh, nod if you've been to a Java one. No, I'm just kidding. I think his internet had froze. That's right.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure I met Josh at like a Java community
Java one?
process meeting in Java
Alright.
one. Yeah, so I'm pretty sure.
Hey, there you go.
back.
You're back, Josh. Yeah, I had asked you if you've been spoken at a
Hi.
Java one, and then you just froze up.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I did. I was at Java one. I've spoken there a couple of times. It's a great
Oh, great.
conference.
Oh, wonderful. That's great.
I like it.
Yeah, and it's different this year, but we just never been to Vegas. It's there's all sorts of different things, but I'm looking for it, so it should be fun. And my
Great.
talk is on the foundations of modern Java server-side apps, which I haven't done yet. But
Nice.
but basically, it's just about like all the different technologies that we're using in our current Java apps, like what like servlet or like a lot of the different APIs we're using. So that should be fun.
Yeah, excellent.
All right, cool. So I could see you again, Josh. It's been a while.
Yeah, it'll be nice.
Yeah. So JCon Online in September 20 to 23rd. No, it's out of order. That's actually organized by Richard Freitner, who was on our show a few months ago. Well, he's one of the organizers. He's not the only one. But I'm doing some talks there as well. It's like a fun conference. And Connect.tech, another one from Vince and Pratik. Connect.tech is more of a front-end focused conference. So this will be right up
I didn't know that.
alley. Yeah, it's all about, it used to be Connect.js, but they changed it to Connect.tech. So it's all the front-end stuff.
Oh, I know the background. There was that bad thing that happened in Atlanta a few years ago for a JavaScript conference, and then they backed out and somehow took the money. But
really?
Yeah. And so Pratik and Vince swooped in and saved the conference and did a few other things. So I think that's somehow related to this. Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've been there once or twice. It's a good conference. So if you're in that area, definitely check it out.
Yep.
Java Summit IL.
Good for them.
Yeah, definitely. And I think they're happy to have it back. I think they might have tried it last year, but last year was not a great year for conferences. So
right. Neither's this year, to be honest with you.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I'll say this to all our listeners. If you're going to a conference and you haven't had COVID yet, you're about to have COVID.
You're not helping.
No, I know. Look, I think everyone is like assessing the risk. And I might as well just be honest with you, like, the tweets afterwards, just like, oh, it finally got me and things like that. So when you go to a conference, be vaccinated, protect yourself and things like that. But, the chances are going to be good because you're networking with people all over again. So still have a good time. Just go have a good time. Just make sure you're up to date with vaccines and stuff like that. It's just a health message from Dan here. So
yeah, thank you, Dano. Someone added Spring 1. I don't think it was me. Did anyone add Spring 1? All right, well, Spring 1 is coming.
Good.
December 6th through 8th, the CFP was open. I'm not sure it is now, but you may want to check it out if you're curious. And that is in Max's hometown, San Francisco.
Here we go.
And Progressive Web Experience, December 4th through 7th in good old Clearwater.
Yeah, these are all no fluff major conferences.
So is it no longer at the same time as another conference? So now it's like back to back with Tech Leader Summit. Is that the deal?
Yeah, I think so.
Like a dual conference thing.
Now it's a triple. Yeah. So Progressive Web Experience is for front end talks. Tech Leader Summit is for tech leaders or people who want to pretend to be leaders, where we discuss how to use buzzwords like synergistic and
Journey.
I'm just kidding. Journey.
That's a new one.
That's right. You know, but no, I don't think there's anything like that. But anyways, I'm sure there's some good talks there. I don't participate usually in that one because I'm not a leader. Follower. That's right. Anyway, ArchConf is one that I usually talk in as well. So that's more architecture based, where we talk about, you know, architecture, obviously Kubernetes,
Yes.
other things like that involved.
All right,
All that
cool.
good stuff. Yep.
And then looking ahead to 2023, jChampions Conf is going to be in January, and there's another one that I forgot about. Well, I'm sure you'll hear about it later. So
Yep. Sounds good.
that's our conference roundup. Woohoo!
Woo!
All right, so I think we're at the end of another marathon podcast, and we appreciate Max for sitting with us for several hours on a Friday evening.
Yeah, Max, thank you so much for joining us today.
Of course, thank you for inviting me. This was fun.
Yeah, it was our
Yeah, excellent, Max. Good seeing you again.
indeed. And we will see you all in the podcast land or at a conference near you. One of the two.
All right, cool. See you, everyone.
All right, thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks, folks.
Bye.
For listening.
Bye.
Okay.
Bye.